Manny Amezcua, firm president, CEO with MassMutual Great Lakes and founder of the Podium group, here with my dear friend Gail Goodman, the phone teacher, speaker, trainer, coach, and author. Recent book, Modern Appointment Setting. Gail, it's an absolute blessing to have you in the greater Detroit area with us today. Tell me a little bit about the book and where the inspiration for the book came from.
The book is about how financial advisors need to understand prospecting and getting that first appointment, which traditionally we call a fact find. Things have changed so much in the 30 plus years that I've been part of the family of financial services that at some point, and also because of on-demand publishing, I felt I needed to sit down and write it. Literally every couple of months, I have to gather my thoughts and think, should I add something to my book to edit it? And because of on-demand publishing, it could be a new volume. The challenge has always been having enough prospects and setting the first appointment. The average advisor has a pretty high closing rate because what my managers say to me is, you know, Gail, when they get in the door, they are so great. And I'm thinking, right, because that's not the hard part. And prospecting is the hard part because I don't think that we're teaching people what needs to happen now. And that's why I called the book Modern Appointment Setting. A lot more face-to-face networking, asking people about themselves and being involved in your community because you can't sit down and just sit and make 6 hours worth of calls like you and I used to do 100 years ago.
Yeah, and you know what? That is a great point. I mean, times have changed. Attention is today's greatest currency, and it's that much harder to get someone's undivided attention, isn't it?
Well, it's not only harder. I think that because everybody is marketed to death, like I can't get my phone to stop popping up and telling me, forget headlines, that's one thing, but like the thing on eBay is going to be gone. It's like all these people who suddenly have my email address because I buy things online, and the constant barrage. I think people have built greater walls. And the bad thing about those cell phones, I call them your rectangle. I'd be facetious about them. Sure. That rectangle has changed our society and our culture. And anybody who doesn't acknowledge that is missing the boat. It's not just about computers. It's about that phone. That person doesn't have to talk to you anymore. And that's why it's hard.
Wow, great observation. Right. So tell me, I've always been curious. So I mentioned to you when we had the first opportunity to meet a few years back at the conference out west, I mentioned to you that I felt like I had known you forever. Yes. You know, I grew up in the business learning from some of the industry greats who are dear friends of yours. So I felt like I had had a 15-year relationship with you, even though I hadn't. Tell our viewers a little bit about how you got started in not just the financial services industry, but in the space of really establishing yourself as the premier expert in phoning for the appointment.
My first sales job, and I had started life as a psychiatric occupational therapist and found that that was not a good match for me. I was recruited into sales, and everybody said, oh, you have a great sales personality, whatever that is. I acknowledge that. And then I got recruited by actually what was the first kitchen refacing company in America. And we were selling kitchen refacing in the early 80s before everybody knew what it was. And what happened is the woman who hired me just threw me out there because, again, I had a sales personality. And I went on 25 appointments and sold nothing. No one was more upset than me. She was upset. I was devastated because I was usually pretty successful at what I did. Sure. And this was a really devastating experience. Luckily, some people convinced her to send me to Pittsburgh, where the most successful dealer in our company was willing to train anybody's salespeople. And I spent 4 brutal days drinking a lot of coffee and staying up till late at night. Because in Pittsburgh, there's a shift town at that time. So they had sales morning, noon, and night, which not every city had. And I learned so much, I finally knew how to sell. I was insane after that. But he recognized that I would probably be a great trainer. And so I became the trainer of all the dealers, and I taught everybody marketing. Each operation had a separate appointment setting telephone department and selling. So I taught all three to each franchise. I had a counterpart who taught how to measure the kitchen, order the kitchen, install the kitchen, and service the kitchen. So between me and him, we had the whole business down pat. When I left that company, I thought telephone teachers were rare, but I had a skill that I had attained from this company. How to, as a direct salesperson, how to set a face-to-face appointment. I don't teach polling. I don't teach selling over the phone. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that happen on the phone. I didn't do any of that.
Sure.
So when I went out and advertised myself and made phone calls, I always presented myself as somebody who helped direct salespeople to make a phone call so that they can schedule a first appointment. And that's how it started. And then when I met this industry, it all went straight down the line. That was the only industry I'm in.
Give us the most basic framework, if you will, for setting an appointment on the first attempt.
When you're making a phone call?
Yes.
What happened now is you can't randomly dial people. This is the big change. My phone is set to only ring when it's a contact. If I'm not a contact in your phone, if you're not a contact in my phone, I'm not picking up. Or if I look at my phone and it doesn't come up with a name, I put it down. Every American admits to me they do this.
Sure.
So the first thing is you have to be known, you have to be a contact, you have to be in that person's phone, and you have to ask people when is a good time to talk. Now, as a manager of a huge financial operation, I would never randomly dial you. I would always, through your receptionist or secretary or assistant, ask for a time that's convenient. Guess what? Everybody has to be treated that way. I ask my sister on a Saturday morning, when I know she's up, I will text her and say, can you talk? Honestly, I don't even dial my own sister. So that's changed everything. So the first thing is you got to be known. You have to be in their phone. You have to ask for a phone date. And then it's a lot easier because they won't give you the phone date if they don't already know who you are and what you do. That's a biggie.
And that is such great, simple advice, right? You immediately reminded me of recent conversations that Samantha and I've had where she says, I'll ask for a good time to reach out to them. And hey, I expect that back as well, because she's the CEO of our entire family in managing, the lives of two really busy children at different schools and 5 different sports who have entire families in Chicago and not Michigan. And so I could really appreciate what you just said, which is everyone deserves that respect of their time for us to check in and qualify when is a good time to reach out.
Here's another big difference.
Please.
If somebody has granted you a phone date, they will probably talk to you. Your chances of getting an appointment are closer to 80 or 90%. I never had those statistics in the 90s and the early 2000s. If you get, quote, an objection, that deadly word, everybody's terrified of them, it's in the refusal of the phone date. It's rarely a problem when you're actually on the phone, which is huge. If you think about the dialing that you did and the dialing that I've been teaching for the first, let me calculate, the first 28 years. I'm not good at math, guys. So that's a profound difference.
Yes, it is.
If somebody grants you a phone date, they already know who you are and what you do. They're open-minded to talking to a financial advisor.
And that reminds me of the significance in tracking our attempts and in managing the science side of the business, the activity, and knowing that, okay, great. Right. So tell me, just to be thoughtful of the limited time we have with you, let me ask you one last question. If I were new to the professional world and I'm considering a career in sales, what's the advice that you would give me today?
Any sales or this sales?
Any sales.
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say that if you're in sales, you really better love people and wanting to hear who they are. Because the best way to sell somebody is to know their story, which is what I spend most of my time teaching the advisors to do now. Never use an elevator speech, never talk first. Always ask people about themselves. Who is this person? What is their story? And how can you, with whatever it is you're selling, step into their lives and then say something that's going to make them intrigued by you.
And you and I chuckled before the camera turned on about how I shared my story with my good friend Sam Rodriguez, who taught me about Ford. family, occupation, recreation, and dreams, and asking people to have them tell us their story first. So I really appreciate you sharing
and
that.
that's what we did before I saw you, which is I was with your advisors, and I taught them how, I know this sounds babyish, but they respect what I'm doing, how to have a conversation, because you start with what you share, whether it's the weather or this event, like we're at a wedding, how do you know the bride and groom?
Yes.
You go from neutral, general questions, and you start narrowing it down. You can get pretty in-depth with somebody, and I've been accused by my own husband of being nosy. I said, what do you mean I'm nosy? He says, well, look at the things people say to you. And I say to him, I asked because I'm interested.
Yes.
So when I talk to the recruiters, the thing that I've said to them is, people have to care about other people, and I don't know how you interview that. But you've got to figure out who cares about others. Because that's the main way that we get into their lives, is showing a caring.
Yeah, and everything you've said today is really just a great reinforcement of something I've heard our mutual friend Judy Hoberman say, that selling is simply a conversation. And my impression has been is the more often we can invest time getting to know the other individual, what their dreams and vision for their life and their priorities are, the easier it is for us to ensure that we're delivering value. And when we deliver value, people, they don't have an issue buying. They enjoy the buying experience because we've brought value forward.
The only way to be able to know what the value might be for them is to first know their story.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. I appreciate time with you as always. If you were going to leave our viewers with one last quick nugget or thought, what would that be?
Be respectful of the fact that people only use their phone 7% of the time as a telephone. And and that phone, that rectangle, I call it my rectangle, that rectangle is their walking computer, their reminder, their appointment setter, their whatever. But trying to just randomly dial another human being in this day and age is ridiculous.
Thanks so much. Gail Goodman, the phone teacher, author, trainer, coach, modern appointment setting. Go get it. Live your life with volcanic levels of grit.
Thank you.